My name is Madison Carter. I am 26 years old from Phoenix, Arizona. And trust me, what my father said to me that night didn't just break my heart. It planted the seed for the biggest lesson he was ever going to learn. Have you ever been told your dreams were too big just because you're a girl? What would you do if your own father looked you dead in the face and said, "No daughter of mine needs college," like your future was something he could control? Would you cry? Would you fight back? Or would you quietly smile and let him think he won? And what happens when the same man who tried to crush your education finds out the roof over his head isn't even his anymore? Would he apologize? Or would he panic? Stay till the end because karma came with paperwork. I still remember the exact moment my father decided to destroy me in front of everyone like it was entertainment. It was a Sunday evening dinner at my aunt's house, the kind of family gathering where people pretend everything is perfect. The table was packed, the food was warm, and everyone was laughing. For a moment, I actually felt safe. Like maybe, just maybe, I could finally share something good. I had been waiting weeks to tell them. I had just received an acceptance letter from a college I worked my entire life for. I didn't even apply expecting to get in. I applied because I was tired of living like my dreams didn't matter. I applied because I wanted to prove to myself that I was more than just Dad's daughter. So when the conversation shifted and someone asked, "Madison, what's next for you?" my heart started pounding. I smiled. My hands were shaking, but I held my voice steady and said, "I got accepted into college." For 1 second, the room went quiet, and I swear I thought I saw pride on my mother's face. But then my father laughed, not a little laugh, not a polite chuckle. He laughed like I had told the funniest joke of the year. And before I could even ask what was so funny, he leaned back in his chair, looked around the table like he was about to make a speech, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "No daughter of mine needs college." The words hit me so hard it felt like someone slapped me. The room froze, forks stopped moving, people avoided eye contact, and my father, he wasn't embarrassed, he looked proud, like he had just put me in my place, then he kept going. He said college was a waste of money. He said women didn't need degrees because a husband provides. He said I'd only get too independent and forget my responsibilities. And every sentence felt like he was tearing a piece out of me and tossing it onto the table. I wanted someone, anyone, to defend me. My aunt didn't say a word. My cousins stared down at their plates. Even my mother stayed silent, like she had learned long ago that challenging him wasn't worth the fight. And that silence hurt almost as much as his words. Because in that moment, it wasn't just my father humiliating me. It was my entire family agreeing with him without even saying it. I remember forcing a smile, nodding like I understood, and whispering, "Okay, Dad." But inside, something snapped, not in a dramatic screaming way, in a quiet way. The kind of snap that doesn't make noise, but changes you permanently. Because as I sat there, swallowing my tears and pretending I was fine, I made a decision. If he wanted to treat me like I was nothing, then I would become everything he never saw coming. After that dinner, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying my father's words over and over in my head, "No daughter of mine needs college." At first, I thought it was just his ego, his outdated beliefs, his obsession with control. But the more I thought about it, the less it made sense, because my father wasn't poor, he wasn't struggling. He had no real reason to act like paying for college would destroy our family finances. In fact, he loved showing off. He drove a nice truck, wore expensive watches, and never missed a chance to remind people how hard he worked. So why was college suddenly too expensive? Why was education suddenly useless? And that's when I started noticing things. Small things. Things I had ignored my entire life because I was trained to stay quiet. Like how he always insisted on handling every bill. How my mom never touched the finances. How he would snap at her if she even asked questions. How he'd get defensive if anyone mentioned paperwork, insurance, or property. My father didn't just like control, he needed it. And once I realized that, the pieces started falling into place. Because the truth is, education isn't dangerous to a normal parent. Education is dangerous to someone with secrets. A few days after the dinner, I was cleaning the hallway closet when I found an old folder buried behind boxes. It was stuffed with papers, mortgage statements, tax forms, insurance documents. I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear I was, but something about that folder felt wrong. Like it wasn't supposed to be there, I opened it, and that's when my stomach dropped. There were letters from a law office, old ones, some stamped and signed. I didn't understand most of the legal language, but I recognized one thing immediately. The house, our house, the address was right there. And the more I read, the more I realized my father wasn't the proud homeowner he claimed to be. There were past due notices, warnings, payment arrangements, threats of foreclosure from years ago. Years, he had been lying the entire time. My father didn't own the house outright like he bragged. He was barely holding on to it. And suddenly his hatred for college made perfect sense. Because if I got educated, if I became independent, if I learned how money worked, I would start asking questions. I would start digging. I would discover that the successful provider image he built was just a costume covering financial chaos and bad decisions. But it went deeper than that, because it wasn't just about money. It was about power. My father needed me uneducated because an educated daughter doesn't tolerate disrespect. She doesn't blindly obey. She doesn't accept being treated like property. And worst of all, she can't be manipulated. That's what terrified him, not the cost of tuition, not the waste of college. He was afraid I'd outgrow his control. And once I understood that, I realized something even scarier. My father wasn't trying to protect me from the world. He was trying to protect himself from me. After I found those documents, something inside me shifted. Not in a dramatic, movie-style way where I stormed into the living room and confronted my father. No, I did the opposite. I became quiet. I became agreeable. I became the version of myself he wanted, at least on the surface. Because I realized something important. If I fought him openly, he'd tighten his grip. He'd monitor everything. He'd cut me off completely. And worst of all, he'd feel like he was still winning. So I let him believe he had crushed me. Whenever he made comments about college being pointless, I nodded. When he said I should focus on learning how to be a proper woman, I forced a smile. I even pretended I was looking into local jobs instead, and he loved it. He started walking around like he had proven his point, like he had successfully put his daughter back in her place. He had no idea that while he was celebrating, I was building an exit plan right under his nose. Every night after everyone went to sleep, I took my laptop into my room and applied for scholarships. I applied for everything: academic grants, women's programs, financial aid, private scholarships. I wrote essays until my fingers cramped. I rewrote them again and again until they sounded powerful. I didn't just want money, I wanted freedom. I got a part-time job too, nothing suspicious, just a small job to help around the house, as I told him. He approved, of course. He thought it would keep me humble. What he didn't realize was that I wasn't spending that money. I was saving it. Every paycheck went into a bank account he didn't know existed. I opened it quietly, using my friend's address for the mail so nothing would show up at home. I kept the card hidden inside an old book on my shelf. And while my father thought I was learning my lesson, I was learning something far more valuable: how to play the long game. I started watching him closely too, the way he spoke to my mom, the way he handled bills, the way he avoided conversations about finances, the way he panicked whenever something legal came in the mail. I stopped seeing him as a father. I started seeing him as a man who was terrified of losing control, and that fear was the crack in his armor. The best part: he underestimated me so much that he never even suspected I was capable of planning anything. In his mind, I was still just a daughter who would eventually give up and accept the life he chose for me. But I wasn't giving up. I was preparing, because I knew one thing for sure: the day I left this house, I wasn't leaving as a defeated girl. I was leaving as a woman with a plan and receipts. And once I had those, my father's rules didn't mean a thing anymore. A few weeks passed after that humiliating dinner, and my father started acting like he had won some kind of war. Not just against me, but against my future. He walked around the house like a king who had successfully crushed a rebellion. Like he had personally saved the family from wasting money on my education. And the craziest part, the more I stayed quiet, the bolder he became. Every morning, he'd sit at the kitchen table with his coffee, flipping through the mail like he was the CEO of the entire household. He'd casually talk about his property and his hard work, reminding everyone that everything we had was because of him. If my mom asked a question about bills, he'd snap. If she mentioned needing money for groceries, he'd sigh dramatically like she was an inconvenience. And if I dared to even mention college, even as a joke, he'd smirk and say things like, "Good. You're finally learning what real life is." It wasn't just disrespect, it was power tripping. One night he had friends over, his coworkers, a couple neighbors. The type of men who sit around laughing loudly, telling the same boring stories, and acting like they know everything about the world. I stayed in the living room, pretending to scroll on my phone, mostly invisible, until I heard him say it. He raised his glass, leaned back on the couch, and proudly announced, "This house. This is mine, every inch of it. Nobody tells me what to do under my roof." His friends laughed and cheered, like he had just delivered the greatest speech ever spoken. And then he looked straight at me. He didn't even try to hide it. He smiled with this smug satisfaction and said, "Especially my daughter. She was starting to get ideas about college." But I shut that down real quick. The room erupted in laughter again. I could feel my face burning. My hands clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palm, but I didn't say a word. I just sat there, quietly. And the reason I stayed quiet wasn't because I was scared anymore. It was because I knew something he didn't. Because while he was bragging about owning the house, I was remembering those papers I found. The overdue notices, the legal letters. The financial warnings he kept buried like they were shameful secrets. My father wasn't a king. He was a man standing on unstable ground, pretending it was solid. But he loved the image of being powerful so much that he couldn't stop himself from showing off. And that arrogance, that pride, that need to humiliate me publicly, it was going to be his downfall. Because as I watched him laugh, surrounded by people who believed his lies, I realized something chilling. My father didn't just think he controlled the house. He thought he controlled me. And he had no idea that behind my silence, I was collecting patience like ammunition. Because the moment he tried to use that house against me was the moment I would remind him exactly who really held the power. It happened on a Tuesday. A completely normal Tuesday, until my father decided to remind everyone that he was still the man of the house. I came home from work exhausted. And the first thing I saw was my suitcase sitting by the front door. Not packed neatly, dumped, like garbage. My clothes were half hanging out, my shoes were tossed in like someone didn't care if they got ruined. Even my notebook, the one I used to write scholarship essays, was bent in the middle like he had slammed it shut with his hand. I froze. Then I heard his voice from the kitchen, calm and smug, like he had been waiting for this moment all day. He walked into the hallway, arms crossed, and said, "You're not going to college. And since you want to act grown, you can get out of my house." The way he said my house made my stomach twist, like the walls belonged to him more than they belonged to anyone else. Like I was just a guest who overstayed her welcome. My mom stood behind him silent, pale. Her eyes looked like she wanted to speak, but she didn't. And my father, he smiled. He actually smiled like he was proud of himself. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But instead, I did something that shocked even me. I looked him in the eyes and said quietly, "Okay." His smile grew wider like he expected me to beg. "That's right," he said. "You don't get to challenge me under my roof." Then he reached into his pocket and tossed a set of keys at me. "Take your junk and go stay with one of your little friends." I caught the keys, stared at them for a second, and then I reached into my own bag and pulled out a folder, a thick one. The same folder I had been building for months. He frowned. "What is that?" I didn't answer him right away. I walked to the kitchen table and calmly laid it down. Then I opened it. Inside were copies of legal documents, property records, tax filings, ownership transfers. His eyes narrowed as he flipped through the pages, confused at first. Then his face changed. The smugness drained out of him like someone pulled a plug. His hands started shaking. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. I finally spoke, my voice steady. "It's the deed." He stared at me like I was insane. "That's impossible," he snapped. "This is my house." I leaned forward slightly and said the sentence that changed everything. "No, it's not." His jaw clenched. "Then whose is it?" And that's when I said it. "Mine." The room went dead silent. Even the air felt heavy. My mother gasped, like she couldn't believe it was real. My father looked like his brain couldn't process the humiliation. Then he shouted, "You're lying." I didn't flinch. I simply pulled out my phone and said, "Call the number at the bottom, it's the attorney. Or better yet, I can call him right now." And for the first time in my life, I watched my father do something I never thought I'd see. He backed away. Because the man who spent years controlling everyone with that house just realized he had been living in a lie. And karma wasn't emotional. Karma was legal. Before we get into the part where my dad's ego finally backfires, make sure you hit the like button, because if you've ever had someone doubt your future, this story is for you. And trust me, you're gonna want to stay till the end. If you're still watching right now, you already know this is about to get crazy. So subscribe, because stories like this happen every day, and the ending is going to leave you speechless. If this story made you feel angry, emotional, or satisfied, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to see what real karma looks like. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't yelling, it's winning silently.